Welcome back to Carrow Road, everyone. Another Premier League game for Norwich City, another Premier League loss for Norwich City. They've been beaten here today comprehensively by West Ham United by 4-0. I'll try and make this relatively short and sweet because, to be frank, I think we're kind of covering old ground, really. You could copy and paste a lot of what I said last week at Aston Villa and a lot before that from the game against Newcastle into one video to kind of sum up this one. I mean, the best way I think of summing this up is the 11th of July 2020. West Ham come to Carrow Road. These stands are empty. Project Restart is in full flow. Norwich City are beaten by 4-0. Mikel Antonio scored all 4 on that occasion. 2 years later, 8th of March 2022, Norwich City are beaten 4-0 by West Ham United. If you need a graphic illustration for the lack of progress or the struggles, the shortcomings that Norwich City have had this season, you don't have to look further than that for a comparison. Norwich City were devoid of any real ideas, any real attacking purpose. I think there was a lot of people within these stands who felt, rightly or wrongly, whether you agree with them or not, there was a group of players, some of whom were waving the white flag at points during this fixture. It was a hard watch, but quite a predictable watch from what we've seen before. This is a Norwich City side who, once they concede, who once they make an error at the back, go on to lose games and lose them badly. And that was the case again today. Again, leading into what was pretty, before we kind of delve into the game more specifically, delve into another pretty bad stat. Only Teemu Pukki has scored more Premier League goals at this place than Mikel Antonio since March 2020. Again, we don't need to look far in terms of the shortcomings or what has gone wrong this season. Norwich City haven't scored enough goals. They've conceded far too many, and they have a defence that is porous, quite frankly, and they concede regular opportunities at regular intervals, and they're good opportunities as well, and they don't create anywhere near enough. I mean, essentially, you're looking at an academy graduate who came off the bench at half-time today, and we'll come on to Tony Springett in a bit more detail later on, to really provide a drive, an attacking instinct, an attacking impact. But even then, he was getting to the byline and whipping crosses in, and there was no one in a yellow and green shirt even attempting to make their way into the box beyond maybe the usual characters, Teemu Pukki and maybe Poeta at points as well. Lucas Rupp showed a bit of endeavour, but there was still a lot of men behind the ball. And this is a Norwich City side that is going down. It's going down quite meekly. It's going down without really kicking and screaming. It's going down and looking quite accepting of its fate. And that is why a lot of these seats weren't just empty come the full-time whistle. They were actually empty before this game had even kicked off. There were patches around this ground where people hadn't taken their seats for this game, where maybe they are voting with their feet a little bit. There were boos at half-time. There were protests outside as well. I've just been down interviewing Sam Byram, so I'm not best placed to really talk about the protests because I haven't got fully up to speed with it. But I was speaking to a steward who reckons there was at least 100 or so Norwich City fans gathered out there protesting against, this season, I suppose, some of the key figures within this season as well. And you get to the heart of what is a very frustrated, very sad football club that is stuck in this mire of losing at this level. And Dean Smith was asked a question after this one about how he changes that in the summer. And he made the point that Norwich have been here before. They lost 10 games on the spin. I would argue now feels worse. Fans are in. Expectations are higher. They spent a lot more money to finish where they have this season, and performances like this won't help anyone because Norwich City rolled over against a West Ham side who played on Thursday, who didn't really need to get higher than third gear throughout this contest, who were cruising through it at points and failed to offer any kind of resistance really until the second half. But let's be frank, it's easy to play when you're 3-0 down as a football player. Let's delve into this game in a bit more detail then. Once again, we're talking about individual errors, aren't we? The first goal for Ben Rama, I feel, again, I'm not a goalkeeper, so maybe goalkeeper analysts and people will tell me I'm being harsh. I feel Tim Krul should probably save it. It does take a deflection, and in fairness to Krul, he's going one way and then has to kind of shift his body another, but the way it squirms under his arm I think he'll be bitterly disappointed with that personally. And it adds to what has been a fair few errors in the last few weeks, and it will only intensify maybe the calls around his position and maybe for Angus Gunn to come in, who, it's fair to say, at one stage of this season was looking a lot more composed and a lot more confident. And I think that probably is a symbol when it's reaching the experience of Tim Krul, Grant Hanley, as it did for the second goal. I think that's really the point where you look at this Norwich City side and you feel there is maybe deep issues in terms of mentality and confidence, because we're seeing players who, even this season, have proven to be relatively reliable throughout large majorities of it, begin to make errors. And I think when you're in that position, that's particularly worrying. So that was Benrahma's first goal. The second was comical, to be absolutely frank. Bowen picks up the ball, slots the ball through. It looks like Tim Krul and Grant Hanley between them have it covered. Krul, again, when it looks like he should come out with two hands and confidently claim the ball, ends up kind of pushing it into the leg of Antonio, for the striker then to tap into an empty net. Some will say it's bad luck. I actually think it's probably a poor piece of goalkeeping, and maybe Tim Krul, when he reflects on this, will feel the same way, because I feel he should claim that. Maybe there's an argument that Grant Hanley being there that impairs it slightly, but I think as a goalkeeper you've got to have the confidence to grab that ball, and maybe, as I just referred to, the fact that confidence is so low made Tim Krul opt to maybe try and palm that away, to swat it away rather than maybe claim it with two hands, and that was 2-0. And to be honest, the game was up after one. Norwich City conceded a goal in a Premier League football match this season. It's very difficult to see how they get into games, but also to see how they ensure they don't lose them worse than they currently are, if that makes sense. And that was the case again. It was on the brink of half time. Benrahma profits again. Jarrod Bowen cutting the ball back. Wonderful finish. But Norwich City find themselves 3-0. There's boos. People already leaving. I've heard various accounts of people who decided enough was enough at half time. And who can blame them, quite frankly, because they watched a team who is down. And when you're down, I always think as a team, and this goes for any team really, who maybe hasn't shown what they can, or maybe isn't of the level required, that doesn't actually stop you from going and pressing or going and impacting games, or just showing a little bit of spirit and fight. And to paraphrase Grant Holt, he was asked a question famously a few years ago: what do you do when you're not playing well? And he replied, you run around a lot. And this Norwich City team didn't even have that energy or that spark. There was a resignation and acceptance. I think the body language of a few of the players was quite telling as well. So, bitterly disappointed for the third goal. And then obviously they have a goal disallowed after half time. Byron pokes in after a Fabianski error from a corner. He strikes the ball. It comes off his arm. That is, under the current laws, a handball offence, and VAR ruled correctly on that. And then at the other end, Jacob Sorensen has his arm right up in the air, and as soon as you do that and make contact with the ball, you're really in trouble, I think. And it always feels like a penalty is going to get awarded. VAR looked at it retrospectively. Robert Jones, the referee, was sent to the screen, and as soon as the referee is sent to a screen with VAR, you know what's going to happen. The penalty was given, and it was Lanzini who stepped up and slotted the ball in for 4. And this place then emptied. I think there were a few chants. There's quite a bit of gallows humour, actually, between the Norwich fans and the West Ham fans. There were chants of that's why we're going down after that second goal, I believe. Was it second goal? Yes, second goal was Antonio's one. And this just feels like a football club at the moment that, as I said, is sad, is disconnected. I think the fans are walking away from Carrow Road at the moment, not really knowing what to feel about this current squad. Only a few of them have credit in the bank in terms of what's gone before. Timu Pukki was the only player who had his name chanted again today. And there are points where you watch Norwich City play football, and it's a completely staggering, really, that he's managed to score 10 goals this season, because the sheer lack of service, and he probably could have had another today. He just needs one more to equal Grant Holt's record, is incredible. But this Norwich side is desperately praying for the end of the season. But let's be frank, if they continue to put on performances like they do like that, already being relegated, I think life is going to become very, very difficult for people in the director's box, for Dean Smith in the dugout, for players on the pitch, because the fans will not simply accept that. And I think they've shown that today, and nor should they, by the way. They expect better, they demand better, and rightly so. This group of players has failed to live up to expectations this season. I think most people are probably past the point of anger now. Dare I use the word apathy, but it did feel like that inside this place today. It does feel like there is a disconnect, a disinterest, a frustration at where Norwich City are and where they're going ultimately. And you can make the claim that there's 3 games left, they're already down, there's nothing to play for. But actually, there are things to play for. The people in the stands are there to play for. They want some evidence going into next season that the script will be different, that there will be some causes for optimism. And right now, all they have to cling on to is their past glories. And, you know, ultimately, when Norwich City made the decision in November to sack Daniel Farke and appoint Dean Smith, that was on the basis that this squad was good enough to stay in the Premier League. Clearly, that judgment made by Stuart Webber and others, I'm sure, has been proven to be catastrophically wrong. This group of players is not of the standard. I think Dean Smith realises that. He will be given a licence to try and change a bit more in the summer. And it's going to be really interesting now to see how these last 3 games pan out, because this is a fan base that's feeling disconnected, a group of players who know their fate, some of which are thinking about life beyond this summer. Let's be honest about that. And it just feels like everyone is kind of willing this season to close, and it is being drawn out agonisingly, frustratingly. And that ultimately is a concoction for a very difficult final 3 games. And this is the penultimate game at Carrow Road. They've got Spurs here in a couple of weeks' time. And that feels, given the attacking power that they have, it could be a very, a tough watch. Before that, we get to go to Leicester in midweek. Just to finish with really some positivity. Tony Springett came on and I thought, I mean, it's take this with caution, because I think you see it quite a lot when teams go down. Young players come into the fold and offer a little bit of energy and a little bit of spark, and people cling on to that because there's so little else to cling on to in the wreckage of what has been a real long car crash. Tony Springett was excellent. He came on, he showed endeavour, showed energy. There were a couple of really good runs to the byline, instead crosses into the box, but there was no one there. There was actually times when he was having to instruct senior players where to go, what to do. It's an incredible situation. But he certainly seized his opportunity. I thought he was very good today. I think he can take a lot of credit out of his performance. Dean Smith, I think, was obviously willing to bring him on at half-time. He felt he needed more athletes to kind of stop the rot of West Ham. He feels that Norwich responded a little bit better in the second half. In truth, I felt it was West Ham managing the game and preserving fitness for obviously what has been a very tough week, given they've been knocked out of the Europa League semi-finals by Eintracht Frankfurt, and everyone came here and maybe was expecting them to be a little bit hungover from that. That wasn't the case. Norwich gifted them goals. They had a relatively easy afternoon, and that is the frustration. Norwich City are not easy, or are not difficult enough to beat, rather. And ultimately, when you get to that point, it's very difficult to offer any sort of positivity or any sort of reasons for optimism and for cheer. I thought I'd finish on this really quite a staggering point. I mean, people say there's nothing to play for. A casual ticket today to watch this game as a Norwich City fan would have been £47. £47. I'm sure there were people in this ground who paid that to come and watch this Norwich City performance today. And if that is not enough incentive for those players to go out and show a bit of personal pride in the final 3 games, then ultimately nothing is. But it feels like a summer of change is coming. How big that change will be, I'm not too sure. It may well depend on just how these next 3 games go. But what is for sure is this feels like it's going to be a rockier landing than it has been in times gone by. And the stability that the club has been proud of each time that it's been relegated in the past doesn't quite feel as present at the moment. And how they overcome that is going to be up to the key people in charge. Worth noting as well, a week on from relegation, still the only senior person at the club to accept responsibility and to talk about relegation is Dean Smith. So that's worth noting as well. I tweeted that and it got some interesting feedback. I mean, admittedly, it's tough to know what to say at the moment, but equally, there needs to be someone willing to put their head above the parapet and speak to supporters, because at the moment, fans feel like their frustrations are falling on deaf ears. And I think there's a real concern about what happens now in terms of how bumpy that road back into the Championship is. Plenty more fallout to come, of course, from this. And then we're all off to Leicester again in midweek, Wednesday at the King Power Stadium for another Premier League game of football for Norwich City. And then it'll only be 2 left. So that's the way everyone has to view it, I think. I hope you're enjoying the weather. Hopefully, if you did leave early, you managed to catch a bit of the sunshine and enjoy a nice alcoholic beverage or otherwise in the sun. Pink and Plus app is the place to go. Of course, take out a trial if you haven't already. Plenty more brilliant content to come through the weeks ahead. Sadly, it's not being matched on the football pitch, but hopefully we can help you build up to the new season in style. Thank you very much for watching. Let's go home and put our feet up. Cheers.